Chapter 5. The night seemed long. Wilbur's stomach was empty and his mind was full. And when your stomach is empty and your mind is full, it's always hard to sleep. A dozen times during the night, Wilbur woke and stared into the blankness, listening to the sounds and trying to figure out what time it is. A barn is never perfectly quiet. Even at midnight, there is usually something stirring. The first thing he woke, he heard Templeton gnawing a hole in the grain bin. Templeton's teeth scraped loudly against the wood and made quite a racket. That crazy rat, thought Wilbur. Why does he have to stay up all night grinding his clashers and destroying people's property? Why can't he go to sleep, like any decent animal? The second time Wilbur woke, he heard the goose turning on her nest and chuckling to herself. "What time is it?" whispered Wilbur to the goose. Probably about 11:30, said the goose. "Why aren't you asleep, Wilbur?" "Too many things on my mind," said Wilbur. "Well," said the goose, "that's not my trouble. I have nothing at all on my mind, but I've too many things under my behind. Have you ever tried to sleep while sitting on 8 eggs?" "No," replied Wilbur. "I suppose it is uncomfortable. How long does it take a goose egg to hatch?" Approximately 30 days, all told," answered the goose. "But I cheat a little. On warm afternoons, I just pull a little straw over the eggs and go out for a walk." Wilbur yawned and went back to sleep. In his dreams, he heard again the voice saying, "I'll be a friend to you. Go to sleep. You'll see me in the morning." About half an hour before dawn, Wilbur woke and listened. The barn was still dark. The sheep lay motionless. Even the goose was quiet. Overhead, on the main floor, nothing stirred. The cows were resting. The horses dozed. Templeton had quit work on and gone off somewhere on an errand. The only sound was a slight scraping noise from the rooftop, where the weather vane swung back and forth. Wilbur loved the barn when it was like this, calm and quiet, waiting for light. "Day is almost here," he thought. Through a small window, a faint gleam appeared. One by one, the stars went out. Wilbur could see the goose a few feet away. She sat with her head tucked under a wing. Then he could see the sheep and the lambs. The sky lightened. "Oh, what a beautiful day it is here at last. Today I shall find my friend." Wilbur looked everywhere. He searched his pen thoroughly. He examined the window ledge, stared up at the ceiling, but he saw nothing new. Finally, he decided he would have to speak up. He hated to break the lovely stillness of dawn by using his voice, but he still couldn't think of any other way to locate the mysterious new friend who was nowhere to be seen. So Wilbur cleared his throat. "Attention, please," he said in a loud, firm voice. "Will the party who addressed me at bedtime last night kindly make him or herself known by giving an appropriate sign or signal?" Wilbur paused and listened. All the other animals lifted their heads and stared at him. Wilbur blushed, but he was determined to get in touch with his unknown friend. "Attention, please," he said. "I will repeat the message. Will the party who addressed me at bedtime last night kindly speak up? Please tell me where you are, if you are my friend." The sheep looked at each other in disgust. "Stop your nonsense, Wilbur," said the oldest sheep. "If you have a new friend here, you're probably disturbing his rest, and the quickest way to spoil a friendship is to wake somebody up in the morning before he is ready. How can you be sure your friend's an early riser?" "I beg everyone's pardon," whispered Wilbur. "I didn't mean to be objectionable." He lay down meekly in the manure, facing the door. He did not know it, but his friend was very near. And the old sheep was right. The friend was still asleep. Soon Lurvy appeared with slops for breakfast. Wilbur rushed out, ate everything in a hurry, and licked the trough. The sheep moved off down the lane. The gander waddled along behind them, pulling grass, and then, just as Wilbur was settling down for his morning nap, he heard again the thin voice that had addressed him the night before. "Salutations," said the voice. Wilbur jumped up to his feet. "Sally what?" he cried. "Salutations," repeated the voice. "What are they, and where are you?" screamed Wilbur. Please tell me where you are, and what are salutations?" "Salutations are greetings," said the voice. "When I say salutations, it's just my fancy way of saying hello or good morning. Actually, it's a silly expression, and I'm surprised that I used it at all. As for my whereabouts, that's easy. Look up here in the corner of the doorway. Here I am. Look, I'm waving." At last, Wilbur saw the creature that had spoken to him in such a kindly way. Stretched across the upper part of the doorway was a big spider web, and hanging from the top of the web head down was a large gray spider. She was about the size of a gumdrop. She had 8 legs, and she was waving one of them at Wilbur in a friendly greeting. "See me now?" she asked. "Oh, yes, indeed," said Wilbur. "Yes, indeed. How are you? Good morning. Salutations. Very pleased to meet you. What's your name, please? May I have your name?" "My name," said the spider, "is Charlotte." "Charlotte what?" Wilbur asked eagerly. "Charlotte A. Cavatica, but just call me Charlotte." "I think you're beautiful," said Wilbur. "Well, I am pretty," replied Charlotte. "There's no denying that. Almost all spiders are rather nice looking. I'm not as flashy as some, but I'll do. I wish I could see you, Wilbur, as clear as you can see me." "Why can't you?" asked the pig. "I'm right here." "Yes, but I'm nearsighted," replied Charlotte. "I've always been dreadfully nearsighted. It's good in some ways, not so good in others. Watch me wrap up this fly." A fly that had been crawling along Wilbur's throat had flown up and blundered into the lower part of Charlotte's web, and was tangled in the sticky threads. The fly was beating its wings furiously, trying to break loose and free itself. "First," said Charlotte, "I dive at him." She plunged headfirst toward the fly, as she dropped a tiny silken thread unwound from her rear end. "Next, I wrap him up." She grabbed the fly, threw a few jets of silk around it, and rolled it over and over, wrapping it so it couldn't move. Wilbur watched in horror. He could hardly believe what he was seeing, and although he detested flies, he was sorry for this one. "There," said Charlotte. "Now I can knock him out, so he'll be more comfortable." She bit the fly. "He can't feel a thing now," she remarked. "He'll make a perfect breakfast for me." "You mean you eat flies?" gasped Wilbur. "Certainly. Flies, bugs, grasshoppers, choice beetles, moths, butterflies, tasty cockroaches, gnats, midgets, daddy longlegs, centipedes, mosquitoes, crickets, anything that is careless enough to get caught in my web. I have to live, don't I?" "Why, yes, of course," said Wilbur. "Do they taste good?" "Delicious. Of course I don't really eat them. I drink them. Drink their blood. I love blood," said Charlotte, and her pleasant thin voice grew even thinner and more pleasant. "Don't say that," groaned Wilbur. "Please don't say things like that." "Why not? It's true, and I have to say what is true. I'm not entirely happy about my diet of flies and bugs, but it's the way I'm made. A spider has to pick up a living somehow or another, and I happen to be a trapper. I just naturally build a web and trap flies and other insects. My mother was a trapper before me. Her mother was a trapper before her. All our family have been trappers. Way back for thousands and thousands of years, we spiders have been laying for flies and bugs." "It's a miserable inheritance," said Wilbur gloomily. He was sad because his new friend was bloodthirsty. "Yes, it is," agreed Charlotte, "but I can't help it. I don't know how the first spider in the early days of the world happened to think up this fancy idea of spinning a web, but she did. And it was clever of her, too. And since then, all of us spiders have had to work the same trick. It's not a bad pitch on the whole." It's cruel," replied Wilbur, who did not intend to be argued out of his position. "Well, you can't talk," said Charlotte. "You have your meals brought to you in a pail. Nobody feeds me. I have to get my own living, live by my wits. I have to be sharp and clever, lest I go hungry. I have to think things out, catch what I can, take what comes, and it just so happens, my friend, that what comes is flies and insects and bugs. And furthermore," said Charlotte, shaking one of her legs, "do you realize that if I didn't catch bugs and eat them, bugs would increase and multiply and get so numerous that they destroy the earth, wiping out everything?" "Really?" said Wilbur. I wouldn't want that to happen. Perhaps your web is a good thing after all." The goose had been listening to this conversation and chuckling to herself. There are a lot of things Wilbur doesn't know about life, she thought. He's really a very innocent little pig. He doesn't even know what's going to happen to him around Christmas time. He has no idea that Mr. Zuckerman and Lurvy are plotting to kill him. And the goose raised herself a bit, poked her eggs a little further under her so that they would receive the full heat from her warm body and soft feathers. Charlotte stood quietly over the fly, preparing to eat it. Wilbur lay down and closed his eyes. He was tired from his wakeful night and from the excitement of meeting someone for the first time. A breeze brought him the smell of clover, the sweet-smelling world beyond his fence. Well, he thought, I've got a new friend all right, but what a gamble friendship is. Charlotte is fierce, brutal, scheming, bloodthirsty, everything I don't like. How can I learn to like her, even though she is pretty and, of course, clever? Wilbur was merely suffering the doubts and fears that often go with finding a new friend. In good time he was to discover that he was mistaken about Charlotte. Underneath her rather bold and cruel exterior, she had a kind heart, and she was to prove loyal and true to the very end. Chapter 6. The early summer days on the farm are the happiest and fairest days of the year. Lilacs bloom and make the air sweet and then fade. Apple blossoms come with the lilacs, and the bees visit around among the apple trees. The days grow warm and soft. School ends and children have time to play and to fish for trouts in the brook. Avery often brought a trout home in his pocket, warm and stiff and ready to be fried up for supper. Now that school was over, Fern visited the barn almost every day to sit quietly on her stool. The animals treated her as an equal. The sheep lay calmly at her feet. Around the 1st of July, the workhorses were hitched on a mowing machine, and Mr. Zuckerman climbed into the seat and drove into the field. All morning you could hear the rattle of the machine as it went round and round, while the tall glass fell down behind the cutter bar in long green swathes. Next day, if there was no thunder shower, all hands would help rake and pitch and load, and the hay would be hauled to the barn in the high hay wagon, with Fern and Avery riding at the top of the load. Then the hay would be hoisted sweet and warm into the big loft until the whole barn seemed like a wonderful bed of timothy and clover. It was fine to jump in and perfect to hide in, and sometimes Avery would find a little grass snake in the hay and would add it to the other things in his pocket. Early summer days, a jubilee time for birds. In the fields, around the house, in the barn, in the woods, in the swamp, everywhere love and songs and nests and eggs. From the edge of the woods, the white-throated sparrow, which come all the way from Boston, calls, "Oh, Peabody, Peabody, Peabody," on an apple bough, and the phoebe teeters and wags its tail and says, "Phoebe, Phoebe." The song sparrow, who knows how brief and lovely life is, says, "Sweet, sweet, sweet interlude, sweet, sweet, sweet interlude." If you enter the barn, the swallows swoop down from their nests and scold. "Cheeky, cheeky," they say. In early summer, there are plenty of things for a child to eat and drink and suck and chew. Dandelion stems are full of milk. Clover heads are loaded with nectar. The refrigerator is full of ice-cold drinks. Everywhere you look is life, even the little ball of spit on the weed stalk. If you poke it apart, it has a green worm inside, and the underside of the leaf of the potato vine are the bright orange eggs of the potato bug. It was on a day in early summer that the goose eggs hatched. This was an important event in the barn cellar. Fern was there, sitting on her stool when it happened. Except for the goose herself, Charlotte was the first to know that the goslings had at last arrived. The goose knew a day in advance that they were coming. She would hear their weak voices calling from inside the egg. She knew that they were in a desperately cramped position inside the shell and were most anxious to break through and get out. So she sat quiet and still and talked less than usual.